All right, welcome back to your daily read aloud, The Wild Robot Escapes. Yesterday when we were reading, first of all, we had the whole tornado situation. How did that end up? Cadence?
The tornado got Roz and Jay and Jad they found her in a ditch, and then they wanted to replace her.
Yep.
But they didn't.
So she had to get repairs. They took her to the repair shop, and the woman said, well, we could totally upgrade her systems. We can rechange her settings, make her even better. Why didn't Mr. Sharif go ahead and do that? Emma?
He doesn't have enough money.
Yeah, it was going to be expensive, and he said, basic unit's fine. So they got Roz back to the farm, and then Jaya and Jad gave Roz a present, and they had to save up a lot of money to buy it. What was that present? Zoe?
It was like where you can hold your tool.
Yeah, it's a tool belt. So tool belts that maybe a construction guy might wear, they'd be around the waist. But if you have a tool belt like Roz's, it goes diagonal, okay? So I don't know if any of you, when I was a Girl Scout, we had diagonal sashes. We'd put all of our, what are they called, badges on, okay? So diagonal goes across her body, and she really liked it. All right, our next chapter, chapter 31, is called The Campfire. Wood smoke billowed up from the backyard and drifted across the farm. Roz was building a campfire for the Sharifs. In her old life, the robot made fire by cracking special stones together until she got a spark. In her new life, she used a lighter. The family sat around the rippling flames and gazed up at the stars. The dog stretched out on the warm ground. The robot was standing nearby, but her thoughts were far away. Her computer brain was scrolling back through memories of campfires and of stargazing with Brightbill. Fluffy white marshmallows were skewered onto the ends of sticks and then roasted above the flames. The children laughed as their marshmallows caught fire. They liked them charred on the outside and gooey on the inside. Their father preferred his evenly browned. When the Sharifs weren't stuffing their mouths, they were chatting happily. That's the space station, said Jaya, pointing to a tiny dot that was slowly moving through the sky. I can't believe people live there. Animals live there too, said Jad. The station has a farm. We should bring our cows up and show those space farmers how it's done. I think our cows are perfectly content right here on Earth, said Mr. Sharif, and so am I. Once the marshmallows were gone, Jaya and Jad snuggled up with Oscar, stared into the flames, and asked their father about the old days. But the children were just too cozy to stay awake for long. So Mr. Sharif spoke to Roz instead. We made campfires all the time when I was a boy. The man poked the coals with his marshmallow stick, and glowing embers floated into the air. The whole family would sit around like this, telling stories. We had a nice life here. But then my brother and sister moved to the city. My parents got old, and everyone expected me to take over the farm. Well, think about that. Do you think it was fair that Mr. Sharif didn't get to have his own choice about his life? No, that would be hard, right? Why do you think he felt pressure to stay and work at his family farm after his siblings all left? Emma?
Because the siblings left, and then the parents got old, so they couldn't take care of them all.
Yeah, I think maybe he felt it was his duty to stay with his parents. Noah?
Did they say he got pressured to do it, or he was forced to do it?
It didn't say forced or pressured. I'm just kind of reading between the lines. So it said, my brother and sister moved to the city, my parents got old, and everyone expected me to take over the farm. So I think there was a lot of pressure on him, right? That would have been hard. I couldn't run this place by myself, he went on, so I hired Jamila. I did the farm work, and she managed the business. We made a good team, and then we fell in love. When Jamila was pregnant with Jad, we bought a few auto machines to help out. Then Jaya showed up, and we bought a few more. If I'd known one of those machines would be the death of her, the farmer's voice trailed off. So what can we make an inference about? Hayden?
A machine killed her.
Okay, that's what we can infer. We'll find out if we're right. Raz wanted to know more about Jamila and about Mr. Sharif and about the rest of his family. But a normal robot wouldn't ask personal questions, so she kept her questions to herself and dropped another log on the fire. Chapter 32, The Old Barn. Long ago, Hilltop Farm was a very different place. The original farmers grew vegetable gardens and fruit orchards, and they raised chickens and sheep and goats. The farm had changed a lot since then, but there were still signs of its past. Low stone walls lined some of the fields, a rusty tractor sat in the weeds, And hidden within a densely wooded grove was the old barn. The barn hadn't been used in generations. Over the years, trees had quietly grown up around it, and moss had spread across its roof. But the barn was still strong and solid, and Roz wanted to take a look inside. A big barn door screeched along its rails. "Hello?" said the robot, peering into the darkness. "Is anyone there?" A mouse squeaked and scurried out of sight, and then Roz had the barn to herself. She stepped through the doorway and switched on her headlights. The vast interior was crisscrossed with thick wooden beams. Stairways and ramps led up to the lofts and platforms. Lanterns hung from hooks on the walls. Old-fashioned farm equipment lay here and there. The barn still had the faint smell of farm animals, even though none had lived there in ages. A large trunk sat on a work table covered in dust. Roz carefully opened the lid and examined its contents. A collection of farming magazines, a pair of leather gloves, a pencil nub, and then she noticed a small journal. The name Cyrus Sharif was elegantly scrawled across its cover. The pages were filled with his handwritten notes and hand-drawn diagrams about raising livestock and growing crops and building barns, about working with the land with the help of strong animals and simple machines. Cyrus Sharif had also jotted down his thoughts about the long history of farming. He believed that the modern world owed its entire existence to ancient farms, when early humans first started growing their food. Those farms were small and primitive, but they had supported villages, which became towns, which became cities. The writings were so wise and insightful that Roz read the journal from cover to cover. By the end, she almost felt as if she knew Cyrus Sharif, whoever he was. The journal was a treasure, and she tucked it into a pocket of her tool belt for safekeeping. All right, any predictions about who Cyrus Sharif could be? Quentin?
The other farmer's dad.
Okay, so maybe Mr. Sharif's dad. Josiah?
I'm thinking it's the first Sharif.
Okay, so however far many generations back, the first one. Okay, Cadence?
Can a girl name have that?
It maybe could be.
Maybe it's his wife.
Okay.
One of the Sharif's family.
Okay, someone back in his family line.
Yeah.
All right, Alex?
Maybe their brothers.
Okay, maybe one of his brothers. That's true. Maybe his brother that went to the city. Emma, last prediction.
Either his wife, one of the parents, or one of his siblings.
Okay, we will find out. Dylan? The dad. Okay.
I mean, not the dad, but like...
Mr. Sharif's dad. Okay. Chapter 33 is called The Autumn. Autumn colors were sweeping across farm country. The lush greens of summer faded to reds and browns. Crops were harvested, leaves fell away, and the landscape turned stark and gray. On Hilltop Farm, the cows were grazing on what remained of the pasture grass, while the herding machine hovered nearby. The field machine was preparing the fields for winter. The drone circled the farm several times a day, but there was less to report in autumn. Although Jay and Jad were busy with school, they always made time for Roz. The children never grew tired of listening to the robot's stories, and they never grew tired of sharing their own. The bees and the mice and the deer and the frogs and the raccoons and the squirrels and the snakes were all getting ready for cold weather. So too were the birds. The owls spruced up their nests. The crows stockpiled acorns. The swallows were still swooping over the farmland, but they would soon be leaving for winter. And any day now, other migratory birds would begin passing through on their long journeys to the south. Liam?
That's like, that's his son, like her son.
Okay, so maybe Bright Bill might pop through. Okay, Eric?
The thing, everybody's going to, like it's gonna go, like, right, viral through the birds, and then they're gonna find Roz, Bright Bill's gonna find Roz,
Okay.
and they're going to, live with her.
Okay, so I like that thought, right? There's more geese and birds flying through to spread the word about Bright Bill. Angie?
I was thinking if it's autumn over there, it might be autumn on her island, so Bright Bill might come. She might think that the robot that's on the farm is just another robot, but when he comes, Rob might say, Bright Bill, and then
All right, we've got to keep reading. I know I have more hands, but we got to keep going. Save your predictions in your mind. Chapter 34, The Delighted Geese. All right, shh. A flock of geese had just landed at Hilltop Farm. It was the first flock of the autumn migration. The geese floated on the pond, cleaning their feathers and nibbling on weeds. But they all stopped what they were doing when Roz waved and said hello. The robot never forgot a face, and she was certain she didn't know any of these geese. But they seemed to know her. Before she even introduced herself, the lead goose squawked, "Is your name Roz?" The robot stared at the goose. "Yes, it is." "And you can speak the animal languages?" The answer was obvious, but Roz politely said, "Yes, I can speak the animal languages." "Do you by any chance have a goose for a son?" "Yes, I do," said Roz. "His name is Brightbill." At that, a voice blurted out, "The stories are true!" And suddenly the flock was smiling and fluttering over to the robot. When the commotion settled down, the leader explained, "All along our migration, we've heard rumors of a robot who can speak with animals, who has a goose for a son, and who is trapped on a farm. That sounded ridiculous to us, but here you are." The flock was absolutely delighted to meet our robot. They lounged around the pond for a couple of days, chatting with Roz whenever she came by, and then they continued flying south to their wintering grounds. Another flock of geese arrived, and the same thing happened all over again. Roz welcomed them, they were delighted to meet the legendary robot, and then the flock continued south. Then it happened again, and again. Before long, the coming and going of delighted geese was just another part of the robot's autumn routine. Straggling behind the others, as usual, was Wingtip's flock. When Roz saw them splashing into the pond, she felt something like hope that they might have news of her son. Sadly, the geese had no news to report, and as the flock took off and left Roz behind, she began to question whether she'd ever see Brightbill again. Chapter 35, The Memories. Roz still dreamed of escaping, of going home, of reuniting with her son. But her dreams were starting to feel impossible. She was losing hope. Was it time for the robot to accept her new life and forget her old one? Forget. Roz was troubled by that word. You see, her computer brain remembered every detail of her life on the island, and it hurt to think she might not ever make it back there. However, the robot could always forget. She could erase her old memories. It would be like they never happened. The heaviness she now felt would vanish. But without her memories, who would she be? No, Roz wanted to remember her old life, which was good, because someone from her old life was about to appear. Shall we keep reading?
Yes!
Okay. All right. Chapter 36. The Unusual Flock. Shh. Hey. Shh. The Unusual Flock. Another flock of geese was approaching the farm, but this flock was unusual. It wasn't flying south like the others. It was flying north in a perfect V formation, and it was led by a young, graceful goose. The flock flew once around the farm buildings and then delicately touched down in the barnyard. The leader whispered some words to the others and then fluttered in through the barn door. The cows looked up from their stalls as the goose perched himself on a railing near the middle of the barn. Then the goose cleared his throat, shook his tail feathers, and announced to the herd, "I am looking for a robot named Roz. My name is Brightbill. I am her son." All right. Shh. Sit down. Sit down. All right. Friends at home, obviously we're all excited. I hope you're sharing our excitement. We will read one more chapter. All right. Shh. Voices all the way off. Voices all the way off. All right. I'll wait till we're all back quiet. Okay. Chapter 37, The Reunion. Something was wrong with the cows. Their excited moos echoed out from the barn and across the farm. Roz sent the milk truck away for its evening deliveries and hurried off to see what the ruckus was about. When she stepped into the barn, she found the entire herd crowded together. As the robot started pushing her way through, the cows turned to her and smiled. And then Roz saw him. Her beloved son, Brightbill. As you know, reader, robots don't feel emotions, not the way animals do. But in that moment, in that barn, nobody had any doubt how Roz felt. She rushed forward and scooped her son into her arms. "Brightbill," she cried, "is it really you?" And I will show you this picture because it's so happy.
so cute.
He's bigger.
Yeah.
It's really me. Brightbill nuzzled into his mother's face. But how did you find me, said Roz. Ma, you're famous. You were all anyone could talk about at the wintering grounds. It started with the flocks of geese that stopped here on their migrations. They shared your story with everyone they met. Your story spread from flock to flock, from north to south, from east to west. Eventually, your story made its way to me. I took off as soon as I heard where you were. I didn't even tell the others. But we caught up to him. Loudwing, the old goose, fluttered over the herd and gently landed on a cow's back. Brightbill wasn't the only one who wanted to see you, Roz. The rest of the flock appeared, and the robot found herself surrounded by old friends and family. Squawking and mooing and laughing and cheering filled the barn. But then came a loud, clear voice that only the robot understood. Roz, what are you doing? The animals hushed. Roz slowly turned around, and there were Jaya and Jad standing in the doorway. The children had seen everything.
No, we need
All right.
to go.
We will see you tomorrow.